Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Flames. Today we are dissecting Milan the Buick Lucic's season here on Locked On Flames.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Flames. I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and today we're just going to chit-chat about Milan Lucic and the false hope that his resurgence gave us. And of course, we're going to close out the show with a little bit of Stanley Cup final talk because it does kick off tonight, and we have plenty to talk about. So the big question, the big thing with Milan Lucic has always been, well, who won the trade? I don't think that question ever needs to be brought up again because it is indisputable that the Flames won the trade. Milan Lucic was tearing it up in the NHL when James Neal was placed on waivers. And, James Neal did make it to the Eastern Conference Final with the Springfield Thunderbirds in the AHL. So, but that's not the same. It is just not the same. Lucic found a new spark in Calgary, and it was so nice to see. He was working with coaches who he had worked with in the past, like Jeff Ward, who was the assistant coach for the Boston Bruins back in 2011 when they won the Cup. So there was some familiarity there, and it was great to see him, have a voice and be a leader in the locker room. But he went nearly 2 seasons without a goal, and it just was not what you were paying him to do. There's only so many times you can throw around big hits and take penalties and get into fights before it starts, looking not so great. But again, this wasn't the same Milan Lucic that so many people fell in love with back in the early 2010s. James Neal, like I mentioned, goes down to the AHL, and Lucic just poured gasoline on a fire and started finding his game again. He was tearing it up on the ice. It was like every time he had that puck on his stick, he was shooting and going 5-hole, and goalies could not read it because part of me thinks like, oh, you're kind of doubting him to make a solid shot because he's not offensively inclined. And again, I'm not a goalie. I played youth soccer as a goalie because I didn't like running. I still made some good saves. But again, like I'm just trying to use some critical thinking skills here, right? Like you're not going into this and thinking Looch is going to score on me. So you're just like, okay, and then he goes 5-hole on you. And then he does it on the next goalie, and the next goalie, and the next goalie, and eventually it stopped. Eventually he just hit a plateau. He had 1 goal in the last 48 games of the Flames season, like the regular season. That is not what you're paying someone $5.25 million to do. It's the same way you're not paying Sean Monahan $6.25 million to sit in the press box and be scratched. Being injured is a different story because that's out of your control. But he had 4 shots in 12 games through the postseason, and his ice time during the Oilers series was slashed. It was an incredible decrease in time on ice, and it just was not the Lucic that everyone was so used to seeing. And I say this as someone who liked him, loved him when he played in Boston. And little did I know, if I could go back and tell how old was I? 12, 13-year-old me, someday Milan Lucic is going to block you on Twitter. I would want to break her heart in that moment. But you know what? I think that what is fun and what is good about Lucic is the big hits that he does. And when he gets the puck on his stick, the Saddle Dome erupts, and people are like, the broadcasters are like, why are they booing him? And then they're like, oh no, they're saying Looch. And it was just fun to watch. Like, I'm not trying to like eulogize him as if he's like dead or not coming back next season, but you know, I think that he isn't who he used to be, and that's okay. That's literally what happens. As you get older, you just like stop getting, or you just stop being good at things that you used to be really good at. I used to be really good at rollerblading, and now I suck at it, and now I stink at it, you know? Like, it's not always a pretty decline. It's not always a fall from grace and just like a little peaceful sort of thing. But it's it happens. It happens, and it's a shame when it happens to someone who is a fan favorite. And you know, coming up next, we're going to absolutely talk about the future for Milan Lucic and what do the cards hold for him, and what does a buyout look like for the Calgary Flames if they decide to take that route once the buyout window opens. But first, let's talk about Rock Auto. RockAuto.com is a family-owned business that is making your life a million times easier for car, auto parts, truck parts, carpets for your car or truck that you need. And RockAuto.com is just a lifesaver when it comes to having to do any sort of DIY work to your car. I fixed my window with Rock Auto. Now I have to get my brakes fixed. Do you think I'm going to go to the dealership? Absolutely not. I'm going to head to rockauto.com and order the parts I need for my Hyundai Sonata, which the website makes it so easy to navigate. All I have to do is type in like your make and your model, and it like there's all these little drop down buttons, and it makes it so much easier to navigate than I thought. So head on over to rockauto.com today and check out their amazing variety of selections for the do-it-yourselfers, the pros, or someone who just needs a helping hand. And make sure you put Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Rock Auto, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Flames. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at Jess Belmosto. I'm flashing it on the screen right now if you are watching on YouTube, but it's JESSBELMOSTO. All right. Remember back in 2020 when Lucic had finally found his game again, and he was scoring goals. Now, I'm not saying he was Johnny Gaudreauing it up out there, but he was capable of scoring goals, and he was scoring goals after nearly 2 seasons of a drought. I think it ended up being like 180 something games, 182 games without a goal. Like, it was a full baseball season. Imagine going an entire baseball season without hitting the ball. I wonder if anyone's ever done that. Probably not. But anyways, there was an article that came out, and I remember reading it, and I knew exactly what this article meant and what the breadcrumbs were. And it was an article about how he considered retirement. And in my opinion, once you start thinking about retirement, it doesn't leave your brain. You know, it's always there. It's just kind of like a nagging thought, whether it be at the front of your mind or the back of your mind. And, you know, when you start playing really well. You're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't like decide to hang up the skates. Like, I'm so glad I'm still out here. But when you have that stretch of 48 games where you have 1 goal and 4 assists, that thought starts creeping up in your mind again, right? Like you're starting to think like, okay, like I gave it a true Girl Scout effort the first time, but now like I'm playing under Daryl Sutter again, and I still can't find that game. And my postseason performance that's not the Looch that I know. That's not the Looch that everybody knows and loves. And it's probably a really hard mental decision to make. It's not easy by any means. And he has 1 year left on his contract, and that has a full no movement clause. So it's not like the Flames can say, hey, Looch, we're going to deal you to Buffalo. See you later. Click. In order for him to be traded, he has to waive his no movement clause the same way he did for the Seattle expansion draft. And Seattle took Gio, obviously, over Looch, and that makes a lot of sense. But buying him out makes no sense either. With a buyout, you have a buyout window. I don't know the exact dates. I believe it is right after the draft, and you have like 12 or 18 days to do it. It is a very short window, a very short period of time. And then once that buyout closes, there's no exceptions. So buying him out is not realistic. The Flames would only save $333,000. So you're not really doing much. Like, you still have to pay a percentage of his salary and his contract. Like, you're not off the hook for it. You know what I mean? So it's not enough of a difference maker to really be like, okay, like we'll just take the dead cap hit. It doesn't matter. And before I looked into the actual numbers of the buyout, I was like, yeah, like why not just buy him out? Like it's fine. Like it opens up a roster spot for like one of the guys down in Stockton, give them a shot. But it doesn't make sense. It truly doesn't. Like, it's not even a league minimum. He would go sign somewhere and take the vet minimum, but I don't know. That's just not the right call for the Flames to make. But I think we need to realize that big hits don't make up for the lack of production and the roster spot that he's taking up. I think it's very fair to sit there and say, like, his time has come and gone. He's on the wrong side of 30, as they say in sports, but he's given it a solid effort. Him retiring is not the worst thing that could happen, and I don't think that he is someone who, is expecting to sign like another contract after this one. I think if anything, it would be like a 1-year deal for that league or that veteran minimum. I don't think it's necessarily in him. And that's okay. Sometimes you just have to know when enough is enough. And he has had an incredible career, and whatever the decision may be, you have to support it. I'm not going to sit here and dog on him for that, because what's the point? It doesn't make any sense. Coming up next, we are going to talk about the Stanley Cup final and reflect on Milan Lucic's Stanley Cup with Boston. I think earlier in the episode I said he's only won one Stanley Cup. No, I didn't. I lied. I'm sorry. Brain fart. But yeah, we're going to talk about his first Stanley Cup win, and then of course the Colorado Avalanche and Tampa Bay Lightning kick off tonight. But first, let's talk about BetOnline. As always, please gamble responsibly. But BetOnline has you covered for your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including Stanley Cup final, Major League Baseball, and the NBA basketball championship finals as well. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. I have not placed a bet since the Bruins lost Game 2. I'm a jinx, and I'm just not someone who should be trying to bet because, again, I don't understand most of it. 11 years ago today, this makes me feel disgustingly old. Milan Lucic won his first Stanley Cup against the Vancouver Canucks with the Boston Bruins. Tonight, the Avs and Lightning kick it off in Colorado, and I think the only people rooting for Tampa are those who live in Florida and aren't Panthers fans. But if Pat Maroon, I'm telling you right now, if Pat Maroon wins 4 Stanley Cups, consecutive Stanley Cups, I will stop hosting this podcast. Pat Maroon, listen, I know people make body shame him and call him Fat Maroon. First of all, that's rude. He plays hockey. You don't. What are you doing? He's clearly an athlete, right? But there are plenty of reasons to not like Pat Maroon. He's like that guy in the group project that does the absolute bare minimum and still gets the A. Those are his Stanley Cups. Also, his wife fought Boston fans on Twitter back in 2019, and I don't think any of us really knew why. But I don't want to see the Lightning go back to back to back, because the main reason I fell in love with hockey was because the idea that, it's the Stanley Cup is literally up for grabs and anyone can take it. It isn't like the NBA where you have the same teams winning and going to the final every year. But Sarah Griffin tweeted it, but she said the NHL is in their NBA era. And it's true. I'm sorry, but this is the first year that it actually is the 2 best teams in the league going after the cup. Usually someone gets lucky and makes it. And that it would have been the Rangers had that been the case. Or the Oilers. But it's quite literally the 2 best teams in the league. I hope the Avs win it. They have been working their butt off forever. I think that they have a great group of guys there. I love their social media team. I know a few people who, work for them, and they do amazing work there. And Nazem Kadri is still day to day, so we'll have to see where that goes. And the fact that he's not ruled out for this series even after having surgery is bonkers to me. But we will just have to see. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm Jess Belmosto. You can find me on Twitter at jessbelmosto.com, and you can absolutely follow the show at LO_FlamesPod. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Locked On Flames, and I will catch you in the next episode where we are going to discuss Noah Hanifin.